Good evening. On this rainy Monday, February 12th, 2024, I call this regularly scheduled council meeting to order. Where you give us 1 minute, we're struggling with a little technology. Let me start. Okay. All right, Councilwoman Lautenbacher, can you please lead us in the invocation and pledge?
At this meeting, help us to make decisions which keep us faithful to our mission and reflect our values. Give us strength to hold to our purpose, wisdom to guide us, and a keen perception to lead us. And above all, keep us charitable as we deliberate. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Chief Grogan, Officer Hernandez, you are next on the agenda. Let's see.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure tonight to talk about the 2023 President's Volunteer Service Awards. It's a program that we started participating in several years ago. And I'm going to ask Officer Hernandez to come up, and she's going to tell you a little bit about it and tell you about the ones tonight that are receiving these awards.
Good evening, Council. So since I came into my position back in June, I've had the pleasure of working with all of our volunteers that we have here in Dunwoody, including the Citizens on Patrol and the bailiffs. Like he said, about a few years ago back, we started the Presidential Awards. What the Presidential Awards are is if they work at least 100 hours of volunteer, they receive this award, and as well as a pin, which is a bronze pin for them. We have hours from 100 to 184 hours, depending on the person. And when I read their name, I'll also say how many hours they worked. So, gentlemen, when I say your name, just come on up here and grab your award. If you can stay here afterwards for a photo, please. First, we'll have Paul Chastain. And Paul worked 111 hours. Thank you very much. Here's your pin. Next up, we have David Cote. And he worked 100 hours. Thank you. Mr. Harry Lutz. And he worked 181 hours. And this is a mixture of both Citizens on Patrol and bailiffs.
Thank you.
Roy Etheridge. And he worked 100 hours. Mr. Ron Silvers. 184 hours. Gary Barnett. 116 hours. And last but not least, Tilke Baker at 117. Thank you, gentlemen.
Mayor, you want to come down for a photo? Yeah, you're going to have a problem.
Y'all try to do two. Y'all try to do 2 rows if possible. You've done this before, I know. 2 rows. Or would you like me?
And just before I finish, I'd like to kind of explain what the two positions are if you guys are not aware about what they are. We have citizens on patrol. They are the volunteers that will ride around the city. They will check alarms. They help officers sometimes with traffic hazards. They might sit behind officers when they're on accidents to make sure that they're safe. They'll have their lights on. They can help with a lot of different things like that. So, and they also help with different volunteer events that we have, and they will help out and come on there. They'll also sometimes help with traffic control at that time as well. And then we have our bailiffs, and they assist with court security every Wednesday and Thursday. So all the gentlemen are very, very helpful. And we do actually have a woman bailiff now as well. So they're great, great gentlemen, and now a woman as well. But we can't do it without them.
Thank you. And they for the bailiffs, if we didn't have them, we would have to have more professional help, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you all. Your service is invaluable in so many ways. I know I see most of the bailiffs pretty regularly because I'm walking through City Hall, but thank you all for your service and Citizens on Patrol. You all do great work for us. Chief.
Mayor, I just wanted to add that we are very thankful for our citizens who volunteer to help. They don't get paid. They get little recognition, but they're much appreciated. As you said, they provide a great service as bailiffs and also as citizens on patrol, and we very much appreciate everything they do.
Ditto. Thank you. And congratulations. That's a big honor. So enjoy. Thank you. Next is public comment, and I don't have any public comment cards. If we've missed them, please let us know. You can just come on up. And there'll be another public comment section at the end of the meeting. Would like to address us then. Mr. Linton, we are ready for your city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm gonna start with the Parks Department. There are several upcoming events that are noted in your report there, starting from February through the 1st of June. Of course, one of the bigger ones there is the Lemonade Days. It's coming up. Our Food Truck Thursday starts on May the 2nd this year. So there's quite a few events that are coming through that department. Also, we did finish the removal of the trees at Dunwoody Nature Center that have been affected by the pine beetles. So we got those trees out before they infect any additional trees. Also, the shade structure contract for Two Bridges Park has been approved. The manufacturing for that is going to begin this month. And then we had our 8th annual Martin Luther King Day of Service. We saw over 600 volunteers across all the projects. We also had volunteers that donated blood through Life South. We cleaned up the community garden, planted trees and daffodils at Brook Run Park, and a lot of other service throughout the city. Speaking of also the shade structures at Brook Run baseball fields, they're being manufactured now, and those are expected to be installed by the end of next month. Also, we have the final inspections for the Sproul Center for the Arts expansion. Those are completed. The facility is now open. I toured that facility last week. It's absolutely awesome. We'll have it open for more tours later, but it is ready to go. The landscaping, they're finalizing some of that, some of the concrete work and other landscaping that'll be completed later this month. Public Works, we have Shamley Dunwoody Road at Womack. Additional landscaping will be installed in March. And also in March, we have the bid advertisement for pedestrian signals at Chestnut Elementary School and on Perimeter Center West. The Georgetown Gateway, the contractor has completed the traffic signal at the Kroger entrance. The 20 feet of path has been put in, 61 feet of curb, and 108 feet of stormwater pipe has been completed as part of that project. Also, the Ashford Dunwoody Phase 1 path has begun earthwork near Hammond Drive. So as you drive through that area, that's what the construction is down there. Under community development, High Street has received their first certificate of occupancy for initial move-ins for the apartment buildings in building 3, or apartment unit, excuse me, in building 3. We also have additional certificates are expected to come this month. So that's exciting from the standpoint residents are starting to move into that property as that begins its first step of completion. Work at Campus 244 continues to progress. The hotel was topped out there a couple of weeks ago. We also have received our recertification as a city of gold in the Green Communities Program. This is a Atlanta Regional Commission recertification. So we have gold status in that program. The city also received the Tree City USA certification for 12 years in a row. Under economic development, one of their projects they work on is public art, the Womack Road retaining wall mosaic is nearing completion with installation set by the end of March. So that's pretty much, I was talking to Michael the other day, Starling, and they were saying the panels are complete, ready to move into place in the next, 6 to 8 weeks. Also working with Stage Door Theater to install a mural at the Dunwoody Cultural Arts Center. We also have our Innovation and Entrepreneurship Program. The Economic Development Department is implementing a long-term strategy to create an ecosystem that supports entrepreneurs and the innovation economy. So that is something that has been a goal of the council, I know, to continue to have more innovative things for the businesses in the area. Communications and marketing, promoting the Georgia Arbor Day, February 16th, Sustainable Hero nominations. It's coming up. We also have other highlights in the department, which is our last meeting, I'm making this just for an announcement. We had our meeting at the Dunwoody High School. It was the first of its kind where the council went off site, in recent memory. And we had a big turnout, about 100 people were in attendance. A lot of students were there. There's a picture actually within your report showing the beginning of the meeting. We also have put out the fourth quarter 2023 report. So through the end of the year for last year, that department does an excellent job putting that publication together. Anybody who would like to have that, it's available online. We do have some other copy of that as well. The Inside Dunwoody, which is my report, goes out to the media. That was put out each month. We also share that with D News that goes out on a weekly basis. I'm going to move to the next department here, which is the police department. We did have our crime response team conducted a distracted driving detail on January the 10th on Chamblee Dunwoody Road at Mount Vernon and on Peachtree Industrial Boulevard at Winters Chapel. We had a total of 24 hands-free citations were issued, as well as 10 other various citations. One thing I want to point out in this, under their workload and activities, are just some of the stuff that we're seeing in Dunwoody, which is it's not unique to Dunwoody. It's a regional piece, but you'll notice throughout the report, there are more firearms being used in different crimes. We had an armed robbery. We also have entering autos. You'll see in here too, our new Raven alert system has gone off numerous times. Shoplifting crimes. And then once again, I'll point out a shots fired case in here as well. But one thing I want to talk about for a moment are the entering autos and things in the public. I was talking to the police earlier today and just saying, hey, tell me a little bit more about that. It's really a public awareness that people would lock their cars. A lot of times the cars are unlocked, and also not leave stuff in sight. That would drastically help to cut down on those crimes. And the majority of stuff that gets broken into are stolen from the cars are unlocked. So, or something is sitting on the seat. And they really, the criminals act very quickly to break in and take the stuff from their vehicles. So that's something that it just needs to be studied a little bit more for the public. And I'll get with Jennifer also. We'll put a little bit more of a public announcement out with the police on that. The finance staff is preparing for the 2023 year-end external audit, which is scheduled to start on March the 11th. And we held our first audit committee meeting of this year at 3:30 this afternoon. But Mayor and Council, that concludes my report. I'm glad to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, questions? Rob?
Just, a kind of a recurring question that's cropped up from time to time, and I don't know if you know the answer, Michael may need to answer, but the Georgetown Gateway project, any tentative update on the schedule when that might be wrapping up?
The most of the work should be completed in early spring. And then at that point, all that should be left is the final paving, which will be dependent on, well, we're going to plan to do that at night. So we may wait until later in the spring when it's warmer. But over the next month, they should complete the storm drain. They're getting more of the curb and sidewalk in on the south end, turning on the signals, and there's some more landscaping going in. So getting close.
So the end is near. That's good.
Yes.
I figured that, but I just wanted to check. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I noticed that we're gonna, is this on?
It doesn't try.
This is on.
Can you hear Chief Grogan? Out here.
Just, I noticed the stormwater pipe draining that you did it in Dunwoody Club Forest, and we're gonna start lining those pipes. Please make a point to let the neighbors know so that our phones aren't blowing up.
Yes, that's our part of our standard procedure. So
I just know that you hit my street prior to that.
Anybody else? Joe?
Sort of related, Michael, we talked about those street trees on Womack and Shamley Dunwoody. Is that conversation still ongoing to standardize that look and feel that will extend as well along the Shamley Dunwoody when we do that from Womack to Roberts?
yes, Womack to Roberts will be much like the Gateway project where I think we're planning 40 something street trees, between the curb and the sidewalk. The Shamley Dunwoody Womack, the few crepe myrtles that were planted out there on Womack were because there's a power line, the power lines are there and they were within the 15-foot easement for Georgia Power. And so if we'd have planted anything, like an oak or something, eventually they would have probably come in and knocked the top out of it.
And I'll elaborate just a moment on that too. Michael and we met with Richard, our arborist, last week to talk a little bit more about street trees. And there are a couple of things, and we're going to look at a couple of different alternatives to the crepe myrtle. There's always a fine line what we worry about in terms of pedestrian safety, of course, but vehicular safety too. And if somebody hits a tree, we did have right over here on Ashford Center Parkway, we did have a death from somebody hit a tree over there. It wasn't a huge tree, but we try to be very careful. The beauty of the crepe myrtle is that it will break over. Of course, that's not ideal for the pedestrian if it goes through the tree piece there, but the trees are not designed 100% for either party, but there are some other trees, and I don't want to misquote what the arborist told us, Michael, a different kind of street tree. I'll say it's more attractive than the crepe myrtle, or more hardy than the crepe myrtle, and still would meet the requirements of Georgia Power. And we're trying to keep a fine line there on what the best thing to do is. And Michael, when we met, we'll find out what that tree is, but Michael's very open to modifying that. And at some point in the future, I want to bring it to the council to see if y'all even want to have the crepe myrtle as a street tree or not. We have it as trees for behind, other parts of other plantings, but if that's even something y'all even want for a street tree, because if it's not, we'll substitute it with these other plants. So I just want to clarify that, but it's a great question.
The kudos, because Michael's here. Thanks for, I noticed Carl Thomas, great guy. He did a speaker series over at the Nature Center on stormwater, and he made it exciting and engaging. It was about historical stormwater, and he did a great job. So just wanted to kudos to that's under your realm there, Michael.
I'll
Thank you.
pass that along.
Yeah, thanks.
Stacy?
My question is actually for Richard and High Street. I saw that they're doing a review of the master plan. Are they making any substantial changes or just updating it, or do we even know because you haven't done the review yet?
The review is for their sign portion. It goes to planning commission tomorrow night. It'll come to you all. Well, not tomorrow night, in a month or so.
Right.
So, yeah.
Anybody else? So in the economic development report, it missed, I guess, the announcement about Innova Solutions, which is one of the 10 largest private companies in Metro Atlanta, which probably means it's one of the 10 largest or 15 largest in the state. They are relocating from Duluth, Georgia. They purchased a building, Perimeter Center East. And that's a really big deal. They'll bring 300 employees. And they have subsidiaries. There are 50,000 employees, I think, worldwide. They have subsidiaries that they may eventually bring here as well. We hope that's the first of many great announcements in 2024. Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, Eric. All right. Consenda
Move to approve.
moved by John. Oh, yeah, moved by John. I need a second. Second by Tom. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, John.
Do we have any, do we have a member serving on the
do-
Board of Ethics? Do
he
they happen to
is-
be here to be recognized?
He is not.
Okay, thank you.
I do not see him. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, I call the question. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Sharon, that passes unanimously. I know we're having some technology problems. You're gonna have to tell me if we need to slow down. But actually, you have to read the next thing, so it'll be on you to.
Item number 6 is a resolution to return to the Planning Commission the text amendment to amend Chapter 27, the zoning ordinance of the City of Dunwoody Code of Ordinances to define community residences and recovery communities and create use regulations for such uses.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a resolution to send back to the Planning Commission, the text amendment for the defined community residences, recovery communities, and create, use regulations for such uses.
Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none, this is an action item.
Move to approve.
Moved by Tom,
Second.
second by Joe. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, I call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Sharon, that passes unanimously, or Jessica, whoever's taking notes.
Item number 7 is a resolution for a temporary moratorium of the acceptance of new applications for business licenses or special use approval, permanent use approval, or building land disturbance site plan and design review, or other permits and licenses for drug rehabilitation centers and other facilities that treat drug and alcohol dependency.
Good evening. This item extends the previously adopted moratorium on drug rehabilitation centers and other facilities for the treatment of drug dependency with an expiration date of August 13th, 2024. The moratorium applies to any permits or licenses for drug rehabilitation centers unless it is overturned by approval of the ordinance by you all. So.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, this is an action item.
Move to approve.
Moved by Tom. Second by Catherine. Any further discussion or comments, questions? Seeing none, I call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, this motion carried. Oh, wait, sorry. Any opposed? I was too fast. Okay, so 6-1, Councilman Price voted no. All right. I think I can run the rest, right, Sharon? Because it's discussion items. All right, Chief, you're up. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to talk about a request for 5 additional positions for the police department. As you know, over the last several years, we've had some discussions about a sergeant and 3 officers to work a street crimes kind of vice unit to attack our drug crimes as well as vice type crimes and gambling. And right now, those duties are divided amongst our detectives or officers on the road. We do not have a single group of people that are responsible for those type of investigations. It's really a gap in service for our department that this unit will be able to fill. It's a specialized type unit that requires a lot of additional training and experience to be able to investigate these type of investigations, these type of drug crimes particularly. This is something that we've talked about for some time, and there's a lot of interest from our department about filling those positions. It's also something that would, I believe, help us in the long run with our recruitment efforts, because that's one of the things that's mentioned sometimes is about the lack of opportunities inside the department for specialized assignments. More importantly, it's something that meets a need of our department right now and of our community. That unit was recommended by the Barry Dunn study for us to have this unit. And so that's one of the four of the positions that we're requesting tonight. The second one is for a civilian position. That's a fleet manager position. Right now we have a lieutenant in uniform patrol, the day shift lieutenant that does that responsibility and has for the last 15 years. The challenge for us, it takes that lieutenant a lot of his time and pulls him away from leading and managing the shift that he's on. And it'd be better served by having a civilian that could do that, so that lieutenant can be responsible for running the shift, leading, taking care of the sergeants and making sure the shift is doing what it should be doing. The money for these positions can be allocated out of ARPA 2 funds, and it totals $1,289,000 roughly, and that will pay for 2024 and 2025 for these positions. Filling the civilian position starting April 1st of 2024, or allocating the funds at that time, and for the the sworn positions, allocating those funds July 1st, 2024 out of the ARPA 2 funds. And I think Richard is coming up next to discuss that. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have about this request.
Tom?
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Yeah, I know we've been talking about this, the special street crimes unit and the value to the city. I don't think anyone's questioning that. I want to make sure that I know, and you actually mentioned it briefly, specialized training, is that all accounted for in the, I know there's some one-time expenses. I'm sure the majority of that is equipping vehicles and other
Yes.
things. But if we appropriately budgeted to make sure they're properly trained and any special equipment they need?
Absolutely. A lot of our officers who are interested in this type of activity have already gone to a lot of the training. We've already sent them to over the last several years. And then if there's additional training, we did budget for that. I worked with Richard to look at all the items that we would need in the budget for this year and next year. And this is the number that we come up with.
Okay, great. And then with the fleet manager position, again, getting a civilian position, letting our sworn officers focus more on the police work, I think is a great idea. What is the size of our fleet, and I know we're asking for a full-time position. Does this job currently warrant a full-time?
So we think it does, but we'll have to evaluate it once we get into that, because it takes pretty much that lieutenant most of his time. And there's probably some things that he should be doing that maybe he's not doing because he doesn't have the time. So we do think it will, but that person's is coordinating a lot of the repairs and maintenance on the vehicles, making sure that we're getting things done in a timely fashion. Night shift officers, obviously, you know, they can't go get their car worked on, so they're able to leave them here. That person will go get it taken care of. And then every year we obviously go through purchasing new vehicles and the change out, which is a tremendous amount of takes a lot of time for those type of activities. So we do think it will.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rob.
How many vacancies do we have right now? How many open
So
positions?
currently right now we have 6 vacancies.
6 vacancies.
Yes.
So I'm guessing with the sergeant and the 3 task force officers, those will probably be people within the existing ranks that want kind of something different and kind of, you know, more more interesting.
Yes.
So are you, I guess, how difficult do you think it will be to fully staff to make sure we're not short staffing ourselves somewhere else?
Yeah, so it's been a challenge, no doubt. We're just like a lot of agencies around us and across the country. You know, staffing is an issue. It fluctuates. We got down to just 3 openings not long ago, and now we're at 6. And so we've got 6 candidates in background right now. 4 of those candidates are sworn, so they already have their certification.
Okay.
So their timeline, if we hire them to get out on the road, is much shorter. And then we have a couple of non-sworn candidates in the process, and I believe we have another testing date coming up as well. So, you know, I'm not going to say that, oh yeah, tomorrow we'll have them all filled, because that's certainly not the case. But we do have a plan to get those filled. We're also, one of the things that's, I guess, hiring a police officer is much different than just hiring someone to work at an Amazon warehouse. We do tons of background. They go through a polygraph. I mean, not a polygraph, a voice stress analyzer, psychological, PT test, oral interview. They interview with me, a drug screen. There's a long process. We also visit and knock on the doors of their neighbor's house and talk to the neighbors. We visit the agencies they work at or their previous employers. And all that takes a lot of time and effort, and we have to verify all the information that's in their background booklet, which is about, you know, an inch thick. And so one of the things we're going to do to help us speed up the process, because it takes a certain amount of time to do each of those, we're going to assign an officer, or either as part of their duties or as overtime, to help clear up some of those visiting the neighbors and things like that they can do to help speed up the process. So I think we'll be able to get those hopefully filled soon, and then can jump right into filling those positions. But in answer to your question, it will certainly be filled by people who are already here at our department, who are interested in, you know, getting those positions.
Thanks. And thank you for providing that background on what the hiring and review actually entails. I hope people have an appreciation that we hire very good quality officers, and there's a reason, and it's because we have a good process. And I'm glad you just illustrated that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
John.
Thanks, Chief. Let's talk a little bit about the Barry Dunn study.
Sure.
That study was pretty comprehensive. It interviewed many of your officers, I'm guessing. It interviewed public. It interviewed everybody that they could possibly touch. Would you say it was pretty comprehensive?
Yes, sir.
We approved that. You actually asked us to approve and accept the final recommendations on October 30th of 23. And that report cost us over $100,000. We approved it. Chief, did you accept the final recommendations of that report?
I didn't necessarily agree with everything in the report, but I did certainly accept it.
Okay. Because I went through it and I was trying to understand where your ask was to the Barry Dunn. The Barry Dunn report lists, it categorizes the needs and the recommendations as either critical, high, or medium non-urgent. So there's 3 different categories. And the main need, the main critical, was that you needed street officers for service calls. And they recommended a number of new bodies being put into the uniform protection or uniform patrol. The second one, and there's just, they want to get street cops on the street is really the main critical ones. The report then goes into talking about the street crimes unit, and actually it's a medium non-urgent ask. It was listed that you should really do everything else before you do this. So when it comes to the fleet manager, again, it was also lower ranked, but at the same time, that will make your officer or your lieutenant more efficient. There were some discrepancies. The report says that the street crimes unit only needs to be 2 investigators and a sergeant, but you're asking for 3 investigators and a sergeant. I'm just trying to understand, why would we not follow the Barry Dunn report that you brought to us, that was interviewed all of your officers, why aren't we honoring that report and doing the critical things first versus doing this drug street crime unit?
Sure.
I'm trying to understand it, because
I-
again, to
I-
me, the ask from the Barry Dunn report is very different than your ask, which they would have categorized as medium non-urgent.
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that question. So, Barry Dunn did a great job, but they're not in the Dunwoody community. They're not in our department. They don't see what we see every single day. They took a snapshot from 2021. That's how they did their report. And so my ask is coming from the experience that we've had dealing with these type issues and our lack of ability to deal with all of them like we should have. We have officers answering calls right now. And so, yeah, we could incrementally improve that. And I hope we can in the future, incrementally improve that by adding officers that's on the shift. We have nobody assigned to work these drug cases, period, right now. And that's why I look at it as a higher priority than maybe Barry Dunn does. And I think if you talk to the members of our department, the majority of them, they would look at it that way as well, because they recognize and they see the amount of drugs, and I detailed some of them in my memo to you guys, some pretty large cases. We recently had one just the other day or within the last few weeks where a shot was fired. A lot of times drugs involves guns. There were like 12 or 13 guns at that house, a bunch of drugs, including fentanyl, I believe. And we seized $100,000 in cash. That was happening in Dunwoody, and that was at a single family home, not an apartment. And so these type of activities are happening in Dunwoody, and we don't know the extent that they're happening because we don't have anybody that's their particular job to do that. We have detectives who investigate burglaries and thefts and robberies and homicides when we have them. We have officers who handle calls when we have them, but we have nobody doing that right now. Now, if we get somebody complains and says, "Hey, I think my neighbor's selling drugs," then we'll assign that to a detective. But they've got to, these things involve surveillance, maybe doing all kinds of things that, things we're not necessarily going to discuss publicly, but it takes a lot of time, and they're not investigating their burglaries, their thefts, their cars getting broken into if they're doing that type of investigation. So that's one reason, or the main reason, why I look at that as more of a priority. It's something that we've asked for some time, and I believe it's a big need, for our department.
All right, Chief, I'm not going to belabor it. I just, I'm seeing big disagreement between what the Barry Dunn report shows and what your ask is. Thank you. Sure.
Joe.
Yeah, I've got some questions, Chief. Thanks. So I see this as a tactical specific ask. A little bit of dovetailing what John discussed with the Barry Dunn. Without having conversed with John prior to this, I'd like to have a check-in on the Barry Dunn study of all those recommendations to date, prioritize, seeing what we've done so far and what's outstanding, and where does this specific ask fit in the realm of their recommendations. So if there's a roadmap of, okay, these were their recommendations. I know staff came back, but as John alluded to, the last time it was brought up to council was when Barry Dunn presented it.
Sure.
Right. That might be a great item for our retreat, potentially, to just have a review of that. Where are we now? Let's look at the big picture and have those check-ins. Does that sound a reasonable ask?
Sure.
That'd be great. So then having all that big picture, then I might be further enabled to say where this fits on the realm of what our roadmap looks like and what we've implemented so far, and what we're going to continue on, because it's a journey. It's not just a checklist.
Right. Well, I don't think anything we can tell you would necessarily be different than what you're already reading in the Barry Dunn report as far as their recommendation. Their recommendation is what their recommendations are. Really the only thing that we can talk about is the timeline for implementing all their recommendations and who's assigned to it and how long those kind of things will take. That's not going to change what they recommended.
Well, I get that, but it's the prioritization and the funding source to me.
It's not gonna change their prioritization either. Yeah.
So how are we prioritizing that?
Well, that's what y'all have to decide.
Right, so I'd like to hear, here's everything that costs money in the Barry Dunn. Council prioritized.
Right.
And then, okay, here's the first $1 million of prioritization. Then we know, then we're gonna focus on that, right?
Yeah.
So I'd like to have a chance as a council to have that conversation. To look at things that cost money on the funding, and then we come back to say, what are our priorities? And if this comes to be the number one, then that's great. Then we've all kind of gone through that thought process.
Well, on the things, on that cost money from the police department, this is our first priority,
Mhm.
our top priority.
Right, okay. I get that. Okay, thanks. So I'd love to have the update of where you are to date with the plan and so on and so forth. And for me, I say that this is a short-term Band-Aid because I right now would not support this. I'd rather fix our long-term because this is just a 2-year Band-Aid. This is a short-term fix. So if we want to have this systemically, then I'd like to make the tough decisions now to say, you know what, we have a long-term funding source. Because if we get to 100% strength across the board, and people realize that there's, oh, by the way, these four other people, these positions end at the end of 2026, whatever year that is. What
No,
are we telling new applicants?
No,
The 2-year.
they are. We have
long-term-
funding for 2 years. It doesn't mean the positions end in 2 years. It's
The
just
funding
esti-
ends in 2 years.
right,
so
but we have to fix that.
right, so I'd like to fix it first and then commit to
No.
hiring and
No.
adding the new headcounts.
No, we're not gonna do that.
So that's Joe Seconder talk here versus just okay, we got some extra cash. Second, another question is, so this came out of the ARP2. We're decrementing, there was $1 million set aside for social services, and that is the majority of the funds are being taken, those are being removed, correct?
That's the next,
I think Richard.
that's
okay,
the
talked
next
about that
report.
So
Specifically.
That's
that's
not,
the funds coming in for that, so I'd like to find out how that conversation happened. So, okay, I think I've had my, I've asked my thoughts of where I'm coming from. All right,
who,
thank you.
John? Did you, right, sorry.
One more question, Chief. Tell me about the crime reduction unit. How's it being staffed right now? What's the difference between the crime reduction unit that you currently have in place versus the
Crime response team?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that sounds very similar.
yeah.
And
Well,
what's the staffing there? What's
so
the metrics? What's the
It's-
rest?
So it's a traffic unit. So it's not, they don't deal hardly at all with crime. Their main focus is traffic. And to take y'all back just a little bit about how we got there. And it's called the crime response team at the time because there was some reluctance to call it a traffic unit on the council's part at the time. So we just kind of stayed away from the nomenclature. But they work all the traffic complaints that come into the city. And they try to do those within 24 hours. So speeding on Peeler or North Peachtree or wherever. And that's their main focus is working traffic. And they write about 250, 300 citations a month. And they do the distracted driving details that the city manager talked about, usually at least once a month. And so that's kind of their focus.
All right, so they're fully staffed right now?
No,
No.
there's so obviously, we have 6 officers opening, those positions come from somewhere. So some are in uniform patrol, one's in community outreach, one's on the crime response team, and 1 or 2 is in detectives.
Okay.
So they're kind of spread out, which, try not to affect
Right, I
one
get it.
group more than another.
So of the uniform patrol officers, which the Barry Dunn report says you need more of, I'm guessing that you sometimes use the crime reduction force to use everyday calls. Do they do everyday calls as well? Do they do calls for service?
If the call volume gets busy, yes,
Okay, other than that, they're doing traffic.
they're doing traffic. Yeah, they're not assigned to a beat as a primary response unit.
Right.
But, if they hear they're busy, they'll go ahead and start answering calls, or they'll go back them up on calls, things
Okay.
like that.
I'm just trying to understand the manpower jurisdiction between specialized units and everyday calls.
Yes,
Especially when this report says you need more manpower for everyday calls.
yes,
Thank you. I think I got it.
okay.
Stacy?
actually kind of to piggy on a little bit about what John was asking with the specialized unit versus the patrol officer. So how would the street crimes unit fit with that? Like in terms of backing up the officers, and so what are they doing if they're, what does their day look like? Or their shift look like?
So there wouldn't be assigned as a primary call taker. They would be working to, if they say got several drug complaints, they might be doing surveillance in unmarked cars. They might be doing they might be in uniform patrol, different activities. And so they're primary dealing with the type of activity that you would if you were doing some type of drug investigation. And so it could be in uniform patrol, it could be in unmarked or plainclothes capacity.
But again, if the call volume rises immensely, I assume they're available.
Yeah, if they're in a uniform patrol, they can, but if they're undercover, we don't want to send them to a car in jeans or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So one of my questions was similar to that question. So when there is an all hands on deck situation, whether it's a bridge catching on fire and Councilman Lautenbacher has to direct traffic too, because she was in a ride along, or something terrible at the mall,
Sure.
or an apartment complex explosion, how does that work with everyone and their titles?
So
Yes.
if it's something serious, then
Right.
And we've had calls recently where detectives who were in their cubicles working or in their offices
Mhm.
working, and they got into a vehicle and went and drove to the scene and assisted with whatever was going on. So those kind of things happen naturally, so to speak. We know, and if this type of incident, we need this response, we get those people there regardless of what unit they're in or where they're assigned. And if we need to, we've had things happen on day shift where we called night shift in
Right.
early and they came in. We've had one of the benefits of officers having take-home vehicles and working part-time jobs in the city is if they're at a part-time job and something tragic happens, they can respond. And so we've had that happen numerous times.
And we have how many officers that live in Dunwoody?
I think there's 20 something,
Yeah, I
low
think so.
20s.
Yeah.
That live in the city. There's
We
about, I
subsidize
think,
their
3 or
living.
4 that own a house,
Yes.
and the rest live in an apartment.
Yes.
I think.
Right. Okay. All right. So I'm trying to think how not to lose my cool. So these positions, the funding source is, I'm expressing to what I heard up here. The funding source is temporary. The positions are not meant to be. We have to have additional officers. There is no choice. It is not optional. We will have to long-term figure out how to fund them. The ARP money, which was the American Rescue Plan or the American Recovery Plan, was given to every city in the United States, the first time that's ever happened, every city and town, to help recover from the negative impacts of the pandemic. One impact of the pandemic was related to public safety. In one format, it got much harder to find officers. The second was certainly, I think we've seen an increase in illegal drug use and certainly mental health crises. I believe this is an appropriate use of those funds because that's what they were actually designed. Part of the purpose was for cities not only not to lay off people, but to be able to expand staffing as a result of the pandemic. We're going to talk about funding on the next item. And, my main concern is that we get so close to being fully staffed.
Sure.
And then we have a few more people leave, and I want to do everything I can for retention. And because that's what my colleagues across the country are talking about. Recruiting is important, but retention is more important. And when I talk to our officers, and I do talk to them, the lack of lateral moves into other areas where they can get experience is a negative. But most importantly, as mayor, in the last 6 months, just that I know of, and I'm sure there are more, there have been 2 major drug issues in neighborhoods, in single family home neighborhoods, which is not to say that single-family home neighborhoods are more or less safe than multifamily home communities, but we know the reality, and this is new. I think maybe Chief can correct me, and there's probably been more than two,
Yes.
but I don't think this was happening 5 years ago as regularly. And with the volume and the number of drugs and the guns. Public safety is our number one priority. At least it's my number one priority. And this is an area where we have to really be on top of it. We need the resources that trained investigators, not just to get the big drug bust, is that what you call them? But also to address the small town pushers and users, so that we can get people help and interventions and maybe prevent worse situations. When we get to the funding, we'll talk about it. You have been asking for this for a lot of years. You know, I would find the fund, like if we could get fully staffed and have this department and add 5 officers and the non-certified, which we're bringing forth, I think in April. Is that right, Eric? Yeah, in April, we're going to bring forth the recommendation for the non-certified that the Barry Dunn study also recommended. We just didn't want to bring it all at once. I would do it all in a minute. We just have to get fully staffed, and then we can talk about the next phase.
Well, I think one of the things, I think if the council approves moving forward with this request, I think it'll give a lot of people in the department an incentive to really work hard to help recruit, because we always talk about every person in our department's a recruiter. I know I pass out cards all the time to people that I meet, and I know you do and others. And so I think, you know, knowing the certainty to know that, hey, these positions have been approved and they're waiting there, we just got to get filled in order to get them. I think that's going to be a big motivator.
Okay, John.
Just to close out, since I'm hearing something new that I have not heard before. Recommendation 4.2 is increased staffing of non-sworn community service officers. It's in the Barry Dunn report. It's a critical top priority. And I see that as, again, high up on the list. I'm very happy to hear that it's coming in April. I did not know that reviewing this packet. That being said, the fleet manager is a non-sworn officer.
Chief, not an officer, just an
officer.
It's
a civilian position. It's like an administrative position, but for cars.
So it's much like the community service that you're thinking about bringing in April. Is there any thought of?
I don't think it is. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Fleet service manager, they fix the cars. The community service officers, they're going to be doing traffic and police light activities, correct? So they're not really the same.
Yeah, I mean, they're the same they're civilians.
They're civilians.
But we'll likely call them public safety ambassadors, which is a more term down here in the South compared to the CSOs that they had in the report. But they will be able to do things like take private property accident reports or crash reports. They'll be able to respond to all kinds of calls for service and take reports, and we'll, go, some of the things in the Barry Dunn study was like online reporting, which we're going to implement, but some of those things, they could take the reports and take the burden off of the sworn officer.
Wholeheartedly agree.
So they can go to the
wholeheartedly agree.
Important calls.
My only thought was that we also have in front of us this fleet manager, which is also non-sworn. Was there any thought of combining the two and having somehow combine those two asks and have it all in one package, let's say? In other words, I'm not sure, have 2 fleet managers and have them be community service reps. I'm just looking to maximize, since you don't know how much manpower is needed for that fleet vehicle.
No, I mean, we believe it's going to be a full-time position.
Full-time position, fully staffed.
And they're totally different in what their focus is.
Right.
One's internal, and then the other ones are external.
All I saw was non-sworn. I'm looking at it first.
So the community service, one of our visions might be that at least some of those ambassadors might elect to eventually go to the academy. I'm not sure that's not the direction we would want the fleet manager to go.
Right.
We would want someone who has an interest in cars and maybe vehicles. And I think it's important to note, we have about 65, 70. I know
It's in the 70s, I believe.
Right. Because all the sworn officers, everyone has a vehicle.
Yep.
Yeah. And then there's a few backup vehicles
ma'am.
and our citizens on patrols have
Yes, ma'am.
vehicles. Okay,
Yep.
okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Next up is Richard Plateau. Plateau.
Yes.
You're up next.
Sure. So to piggyback off of the conversation you just had,
Mhm.
this would be the proposed budget amendment for two items to fund the additional police requests that Chief Grogan just walked through, as well as some additional funding another year for EMS funding. So I won't walk through. I think Chief did a real good job of highlighting the cost for the positions, for the police positions, as well as the timing of when they'd be started and how much is needed by year and everything. The other ask, and that's $1,289,000 approximately. The other ask in here is $600,000 for another year of EMS funding. So when we originally set up the ARPA2 budget for $600,000, we thought at the time that would get us 3 years, $200,000 a year. When the contract came back, it was over $566,000 for 1 year. So the $600,000 would give us another year. So how we are proposing to fund this is by eliminating the funding for the social services incubator. It has been challenging to find a location, appropriate location to house something like this in, given nature of how much a building costs, land costs, things like that. So that one has definitely been challenging. So removing that funding and then taking the remaining funding out of contingency. What we would do is add $600,000 to the EMS funding for another year, that line item. And then we would do two transfers. The transfer of the $1 million out to the general fund, so we can fund the 4 officer positions and the fleet manager position for the rest of 2024 and all of 2025. And then we'd also transfer a little bit over $253,000 into the capital projects fund to fund all the necessary vehicles and equipment, particularly for those 4 officer positions. So that is the amendment that is proposed before you.
And I thought I'd take a moment to talk about how we got here today. So as mayor, it's my budget that y'all approve with Rich, it's Eric and I's budget. We approved it. The social service incubator idea came about at the height of the pandemic. We thought we could identify a space where our social service partners or agencies could work out of. A couple things have happened. One is that most of them have a space. Actually, all of them have a space, and they weren't asking for a new space. The one that was the least desirable space, Corners, they have moved into North Peachtree Baptist, which I think has a Cornerstone Church with a really nice permanent space. It's a great arrangement. And so their needs were met. And this was, unless we bought a building, this was temporary as well, because we would have just been the landlord and the money would have, when the money was gone. That is, these are not services the city currently provides. The EMS estimate was based on good faith because that's proportional, I think, to what Sandy Springs was paying, but Sandy Springs has since been notified that when their contract expires, that it's going way, way up. That's why we're all down at the Capitol working diligently for a legislative solution that it's not going to happen overnight, to help us deal with EMS services. And so in looking at what our needs are, public safety, and a social service, you had to weigh the other reality is there wasn't a building. Richard said the difficulty when we put that in there, we had an idea of a building. They were not interested in our deal, which is the way it was. And then the needs of the organizations were such that there was no real need for this. So that's, and also the needs of public safety are greater. And this ambulance thing, for heaven's sake, is so expensive. And that's, in order to try it, we have to have the money. We're not going to know short term if it works. It's going to take a while to evaluate it. And then we'll have to have community discussions moving forward of how we're going to pay for it if we choose to move forward, or much more preferably, the legislature gives us some relief so that we can operate a system on our own with some efficiencies and revenue. There's tax dollars are going into this somewhat. So not our, they go to DeKalb. So it would all be built around that. Questions for Richard on this? Nobody? Yep. Okay. And understanding that we, as a council, we understand that this is all one-time revenue. Please, no more disasters. Okay. Next up is you again.
It is me, yes. So the next item is a discussion of a contract amendment 2 with Jacob, contract amendment number 2 with
Mhm.
Jacobs for the financial administrative services that they support. So last year, we had brought 4 positions that were contract. We bought those positions in-house. And so what this amendment before you is to eliminate those 4 positions from the contract and leave within the Jacobs contract, the positions listed here, the executive assistant, the receptionist, purchasing support, risk manager, and then a senior advisor for 25% of the time, and then a floater or extraordinary help as needed. So those would be the only positions that would be left on the Jacobs contract. For the first year of service, 2024, it's $577,000 is the amount not to exceed. That was included in the 2024 budget that you approved. That is not an amount above what was approved in the budget. That amount is included in the budget. And then for 2025, it's $994,000 for these positions to be funded through the contract. You have to
Anybody
answer
have
any
questions, John?
Sir, can you tell me why?
Why?
Why are we moving these positions over? I'm guessing there was some, from my past history, there was some auditing aspect, there was some money control, there was things of that nature.
Sure.
Is that the why? Give me the why are we doing this?
Sure. So we've already brought these positions in-house. So they started in December.
And we
So the
approved
4
it already.
Yes, and it has been approved. You approved it last July, I believe.
Okay.
So yes, so they started in December. So they are in-house now. The positions are in-house. And you are correct. They were majority of our money handling positions. They were a business license position, as well as some accounting positions. Money handling, cash handling, but also for continuity, planning, longevity, things like that. Having people, when they were on contract, it was very easy. We'd train them up and then they'd go somewhere else. Now having them as city staff, we're able to train them up and retain them. So we're keeping that knowledge in-house. We're keeping all that history in-house. So we have found it really beneficial, and the model has worked very well for us.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that that was explained. Appreciate it.
Anybody else? Can you tell me when when all our contracts come up for renewal? Like
Yes.
where?
They all expired December 31st of 2025.
Okay. And if I remember properly, the process starts when?
We'll probably start early in 2025 next year
Okay,
to
that's what I
get
thought.
RFPs out and give plenty of time for feedback and to evaluate everything that we receive back from vendors. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, Major Furman, you're next.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. In 2024 budget, we were approved to purchase 2 surveillance trailers. These are trailers with cameras mounted on them. And I've completed the research on 3 different companies and 3 different systems. Tonight, I wanted to recommend that we go forward with the purchase of the systems from the wireless CCTV company out of Texas. From my research, I believe this is the best system that's going to fit what we need it to, the software and just the company itself and the support that they offer has been the best out of the 3 that I've seen. So I'd like to recommend that we make that purchase for those systems from that company.
Anybody have any questions, John?
Thank you for the presentation. I'm in favor, but I want some explanation. I don't want to just give tools and toys that are expensive. I want to know how they're going to be used. I guess you can explain that they're going to be at the parade. I'm guessing they might be at lemonade days. I'm guessing they're going to be at high events where there's lots of people, the art festival, things like that. I take for granted they're there. Where are they on any random Tuesday?
Well,
How are they used every day? What's the percentage of time are they going to be used? Is this a tool just for special events, or is this for any random Tuesday, Wednesday, where are they placed? Or are they being stored in the back room?
Secret.
Correct. So I tell you what impressed me about these systems is not just the cameras, but the technology that goes with them now. These are systems that we've looked at and brainstormed. They can be deployed almost 24/7 around the city in areas that we need them. We can set them up in a parking lot and create a geo fence around a certain spot of that parking lot that anytime a person or a car enters it, then we get a text message alert immediately to our road supervisors that can go check on that. It also records the video clip on that. At any time, the road supervisors can log in and control those cameras. So if we deploy them in an area, say for our high entering auto, we can set up both trailer systems and cover a vast area with the Zoom capabilities on this. And we can have a supervisor monitor it remotely or put it on automatic where it alerts them when people enter a certain area. We can deploy it in some of our areas such as PIB where we know that there's a lot of narcotic sales. We can record that. These also have the ability for us to mount the flock cameras on them. So if we set it up in an area that we need to hit tag numbers, say going in and out of the parks, then we can do that as well. And we can get our flock hits on that as well. Between Uniform Patrol and the CID division, we anticipate these being deployed probably 90% of the time. In fact, the only time we wouldn't use them is if we have to bring them back here and charge them up. But with the solar systems that are mounted on it, the charging, these can last for a little over a week on standard usage before we have to bring them back and charge them up for 2 days, and then we can redeploy them. But we anticipate using these constantly.
Okay, because again, the flock cameras are up on a pole, but they're always there, they're always on, they're always recording. So when you say a 90% usage, I'm in full agreement. These are great tools. As long as you're using the capability and it's helpful to you and the citizens, I'm all in favor. Thank you.
Or on the admin side, it's under budget, I'm assuming, because it's, you got a 85K quote or so, the budget allocated is set aside is greater than that. We're good on budget perspective on that as far as you.
Yes, actually, it's lower than the 85 because I miscalculated the shipping. I double counted the shipping and so it's actually 3,500 less than that. So,
And our, whatever the number is, I don't need to look it up, but we're
yes,
covered
sir,
on it.
we're under the.
That's great. And how does the procurement process work in general on this one? This might be a little bit wonky. Did we have to put a bid out formally, or are we covering the bases from a procurement policy perspective on this acquisition?
And I contacted some of the 3 top companies that provide these. Some were at the IACP conference that do a lot of business with law enforcement, and set up presentations with them, got their bids, their sealed bids. Basically, they didn't know what each other were bidding. And I got their quotes individually from them.
But did we have to go through our procurement manager and cycle, maybe Eric, is that an Eric question or a Jake
It's an
question?
Eric question.
No, yes, my question. And then Richard, where did he go? Plato. Oh, they have him come up.
Or
And-
was
and
it a state contract?
we can, let us explain the procurement. Richard, you will come and explain the procurement process for everything. And there are certain things that are there, but there are also, to y'all's point, different things y'all are saying now. There are state contracts that are already bid. We can execute those agreements. There's also sole source sometimes, and that's when the city attorney has to get involved and verify that something is a sole source. But Richard, just if you'll walk them through the standard process, and then let's go more specifically into this one.
Sure. So standard process is exactly, Joe. I think you did a pretty good job of summing it up. So once the need is identified, the departments will work with the purchasing manager, depending on the level of the purchase. If it's $100,000 or more, we'll put out an RFP for those services. Try to get as many bids as we can back, have a group evaluate those bids, and then we'll award based on the factors that we determine to the most responsive bidder, basically. So in this instance, it did confirm there was no state contract that we're piggybacking off of. So I think what he said is he got quotes on this one, which is normally in that $50,000 to $100,000 range. We will operate off of quotes. we'll get guidance from Mr. Gates, our purchasing manager, in terms of how to handle this. But we have met what we normally look for is at least 3 quotes in this scenario. And we evaluate them all based on the same criteria we would like an RFP or anything, and then award based on the most responsive and things like that. So.
Right. Yep. Thanks, Richard. Just want to make sure we're covering the bases. Thank you.
Tom.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm not sure if it was officially covered, but there's been talk about money. And if I'm not mistaken, we approved this with the budget amendments that we did at our last meeting, reallocating some of the SPOS funds. So the money's already there and budgeted and approved. I think this is a great tool for the police department. I have a question just on the trailers themselves, because I think of trailers, I kind of think of the speed trailers that we have, and having something highly visible would be great at events like Lemonade Days and the Arts Festival. But if you're deploying it to an area where there's crime, you might want something that's a little bit more covert, for lack, or whatever the proper term is, where it's not as obvious and sticking out. Because obviously, if you're trying to get some stuff on some drug dealers and they say this big trailer sitting on the corner, they're just going to go down to the next corner, or maybe it might be subject to vandalism or something like that. So can you explain a little bit about how that would work in a when you're deploying it in a crime area as opposed to a public event?
Yes, sir. So it looks very similar to the speed trailers. Once we deploy it, it has the solar panel on it, and you can raise up a 20-foot mast with the cameras on it. We won't put any markings on it necessarily. It does come with blue LED lights that we can activate remotely. We can set them to triggers. So if we're having in an area and we want just a visual deterrent, then when someone enters a certain zone and that camera, then the blue lights will come on. It can even sound an alarm or sound a siren, or it can stay blacked out and just send us an alert. The cameras that are on there are also infrared cameras, so we can deploy them in pretty much zero light and still get crystal clear pictures on it. The zoom capability on the cameras are almost a quarter mile. They're incredible zooms. So it allows us to put it at a further distance and still monitor an area from a longer distance. So yeah, so it can be used as a visual deterrent or more covertly. And when we deploy it in certain areas, there's techniques that we can do to get it in and people not notice it as much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Stacy. Catherine.
Major, do other jurisdictions have this neighboring us? Is anybody else deploying this right now?
I'm not sure exactly in our direct contact, but these are used all over the state. There's a lot of agencies that use these, and private companies as well. You can pull into Walmarts and Targets and they have them sitting out there. Ours is just a little more robust version of what you would see there.
Okay. And then in terms of days like this, we got 3 days of no sun. How did you talk to the company about how rapidly it degrades in terms of when you have to go charge it again?
With the setup that we have on it, with our cameras, it can run 3, almost 4 days in complete low light, rainy conditions like this.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Stacy.
So I think we've approved the video board for the offices. So this feeds directly into the video board, and then my other kind of question is like, who sees this and who controls it? Like if you have to zoom in, who's zooming it?
Well, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can set it up automatically where it'll automatically zoom on certain areas if it gets a trigger in that area. But it also has the capability, it's web-based and it runs off a cellular system. So the supervisors, whoever we give the login to, they can log in and control it from their laptops, and there's a mobile version on their phone that they can do that as well.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, thanks. Final question. I was looking at the city manager report and I want to understand how the timeline is to get these in, as well as our IT department. What type of coordination, what type of information will they need? Do they have the budget? Do they have everything they need to tie these into our system? I see Ginger's in the room if she's able to answer, unless you want to answer. How is the IT coordination, and is there budget to do what you needed to do?
The whole system is web-based. The delivery of the trailers, they said from the time of order, they custom build them for us. We could have them in 6 to 8 weeks from the time of purchase.
But as far as the video, I know there's hard drives and I know it's web-based, but is it being downloaded and saved onto our servers?
No, sir.
So it's all separate. It's a separate system and it's not tied to the city servers at all.
Correct, sir. With this purchase, it comes with a 2-year contract automatically for
Okay.
them to store all of the video that we can retrieve as we need it. And we just coordinate with them and then they can, FTP the video to us if we need it for an investigation.
Got it. So
But
it's,
they
it's
take
separate.
care of all the storage and everything.
I just, again, I wondered if the coordination between us, between the trailer and the city, but there is no coordination. It's a separate unit, separate contract, separate IT system, and there's no talking between the two computer systems.
Correct. We don't have to use our IT to maintain their system. So they maintain their own, servers and everything.
All right, so there's no cost for us or in our IT department. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's all I have.
Catherine. And then you.
So is
Rob.
there what is the past 2 years ongoing service plan charge?
So past 2 years, we can, purchase another 3 years. It's $3,100 for 3 years for additional. And that includes everything, the software, the tech support and, the maintenance.
Anybody else? So my question sort of ties into all this. So a lot of times when you buy this kind of technology, the company does the support. Is that how this works as well?
Yes, ma'am.
So if you need it on, do you envision needing on-site support or will it all, you'll be able to get your?
They've said that the vast majority of it can be done over the phone
Okay.
support, but it's a very simple system.
Okay.
But they do offer the on-site repairs if we need it.
And you can look backwards and say there were times we could have used this beyond lemonade days,
Yes.
et cetera. Okay, I'm just want to clear it up for the public that might be listening. Because I believe that some of these technology or technological advances are going to be, I mean, we have a workforce crisis across the country in every area, and we're going to have to adapt. And I think some of these are adaptions that we're going to have to see moving, in the next decade or now. I don't know. But if the mall was having a problem or the Walmart was having a problem and wherever it was having a problem and they reach out to you, you'll be able to decide whether you deploy it or not. And then the flock cameras feed into it. Not flock, the cameras, you can add cameras to it if you need to for license plate readers.
Yes, ma'am. We can
Okay.
add the flock. We have a couple of mobile flock cameras that we can actually attach to that same pole and plug in to that internet system, the cell service, and get all the readings from that too.
Okay. Anybody, can this be on consent? Consent. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, Michael Smith.
At the last meeting, we presented the new 5-year paving plan and we are going to bring that back for final adoption, but there were a few edits that I noticed that still needed to be made to that, and we'll bring it back at the next meeting. But the edits aren't substantial and they really don't affect what we presented as far as the 5-year list and more specifically the list for 2024. So we want to go ahead and discuss the paving for 2024 and go ahead and get that contract in process. This would be a 1-year extension for the Blunt Construction who did our paving last year. And specifically, the request is for $3,291,798. That's the base contract amount plus our standard 10% contingency. And then there's also an allowance for up to 510,000 that would be for the PCID style red printed crosswalks like we have in a few places. That allowance, that the PCID board's going to meet later this month to discuss how much of that what they want to do. But that allowance would be a straight pass-through cost. Whatever they decide that they want to fund, it would be funded by the Community Improvement District, and then we would add that to the contract. The contract for this year is a increase over last year due to prices going up in materials and labor, but we've compared it with recent bids from some surrounding areas, and the prices that Blunt's proposing are consistent in the range of what we're seeing with other bids in the last 6 months. The scope, we have a list of the streets that were proposed for paving, 11.2 lane miles. The streets are included with the memo. And then we're also planning to do the Cultural Arts Center parking lot. The funding breakdown is in the memo, mostly from SPLOST, plus we're getting our usual state LMIG money. And then we've got some leftover money in the old host 350 capital fund. And that money mostly will be used for the Cultural Arts Center paving. If this is approved, the schedule we foresee is that they could start neighborhood paving as early as April. We're paving several streets in the perimeter area this year. Those would be done at night over the summer. Ashford, the south end of Ashford, Dunwoody, and Perimeter Center West. And then we've been talking to the Cultural Arts Center, and based on their schedule, that paving would start after school starts in August and go into September and be finished before they have early voting at the library. So we'll coordinate further with them on that schedule. I think that covers it. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Anybody have questions? Tom, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. It's my understanding this year there's additional LMIG fundings available to cities through the state. Does this contract account for those additional funds?
It doesn't. We still don't have, we're hearing that. We don't have the details on it. We probably will know something, and we may know something before we bring this back for final approval at the next meeting. But we do think there is going to be some more money. And what I would recommend, if that does come through, is to just put it into the paving, and then we can reallocate some of the SPLOST funds that we've allocated to something else if that money does come in.
So we'll be able to easily adjust the contract if need be, if that additional funding's there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No, I think it's going to be there. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Michael, you just said that there was some minor modifications. I just, can you confirm what was published on the paving list streetwise has stayed the same? Was there any removals? I didn't go line by line. I didn't check to see that perspective. Any changes from the?
No, the lists aren't changing at all. It was more, some minor changes to the text and the report. And then we noticed in one of the appendices that listed all the street segments and their PCI score, some of them were duplicated. Like it would say Andover Drive and it was really Andover Court. So we've gone back and we're cleaning that up and we'll republish. But as far as the order that we recommended, we haven't changed that.
All right. So as far as the data you've updated or will be updating the website with the street scores, people are always interested to know what their street scores were and things like that. So thank you. So no, but the paving schedule for this year, for the people who've been notified for this year that their street is due coming up in the next couple months, that hasn't changed.
No.
Thank you.
Joe.
So Michael, for future year budgeting, should we be more concerned? I mean, we need to be a little bit more realistic then, because if we just had SPLOST, well, we get the LMIG, but that additional even 600K coming from the other funding, the old host. If we have to look at the 2025 budget, we need to do better than increase the amount out of SPLOST is what this is implying. Is that an accurate statement for next year?
We may need to sometime in the next couple of years. We talked about that a little bit at the last meeting, just based on inflation. But this year, particularly the Cultural Arts Center is what's, driving the need for that money in the 350 fund mostly. That's kind of a extra that's not really in our pavement management because we're mainly focused on all the roads. So, but I do think we have to keep an eye on that in future years. The report says, over time, we may have to bump that number up if prices keep going up.
So with LMIG, Is it gonna double? I can't, maybe close to double? Is there, because my goal is to be finished with this 20-year plan of paving so that future councils can spend differently. I realize we have to refresh and redo, but it's gotta cost, well, it should be less work, hopefully. In the second 20 years, maybe, fingers crossed. So, but should we add a street or two? Or this is enough work for one session?
If the council wanted to take the money and just add it to what we've already budgeted and
guess we'll
add
see.
some streets, we could probably do that. I mean,
I guess
there-
we'll worry about it when the money shows up. They don't change. It sounds like it's been approved, but obviously maybe I'm wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
And
the
then there's
details are still coming
Right.
out, and so we have some ideas, but just didn't want to say anything
That's
until we
fine.
knew for sure.
Okay, that's fine. And then it's just a question, Eric, for you or Richard, if he's still here, I see him. Why is the cultural money, shouldn't it be coming out of parks or not? It just is a sleight of hand and it doesn't really matter. Because in the past, when like I was on the budget committee and we chose not to fund that, it was in parks, I think. The library, because it's the cultural center. I mean, again, it's in terrible shape. Oh, right. We made it worse.
Well,
Well-
Richard said I could take a stab at it. and
Okay.
He can jump in, but
Okay.
the 350 fund was for general capital at the time that was created. And so I mean, you could call it a parks expense, but we put it in this contract because it would be more efficient while the pavers
That's
are
fine.
here to have them do it. But
Yeah.
I mean, it will get classified to the property, I guess.
Sure. So when we capitalize an asset, for example, it would be capitalized to the parks asset, basically the cultural center. Yes. So
Right.
it could be classified as expense
Right.
as that, definitely. So keep in mind under SPOS, we don't necessarily have that designation of parks under SPOS one.
Yes.
So that's why, thus the need for that Fund 350 money.
Okay. I think in the past when we had talked about it years ago, it was in parks. Go ahead, Rob.
I was just gonna throw out what I mentioned. We also use that parking lot as a staging area for that
Right.
intersection improvement, which I think kind of degraded an already tired parking lot. So I think, I mean, to me, there's a tie to our road projects and that we've used it to stage equipment for road projects.
There is. Huh? No. It's our building. Are we gonna do the whole parking lot? Are we gonna go behind the building and
Yes.
everything? Awesome. And then we're aware that there's 3 weeks of early voting starting for the election in May. And then if there's a runoff, there's 3 more weeks of a.
Yes,
early-
we've been in contact with the,
I don't, I'm just realistic.
yeah, we've gotten the schedule for
Okay.
voting, and we've also talked to Alan at the Arts Center.
Because also camp.
Right, and that's why we're gonna start after school goes back. We're gonna
Oh,
start.
we're gonna do this in the
August
fall. Okay. I
After
missed that.
school starts and be done before, I think they said the early voting starts in mid-October. I have the date, but
Yeah, it would be there should be no
we're gonna
election consequence.
go in that window.
Okay, perfect. And that'll be awesome. All right. Thank you, Michael. So is what you're changing substantial enough that this should not just be on the consent agenda?
This could be on, we're not gonna change anything in this agenda item, so it
Okay.
could go on consent. I don't
Is
think,
everybody okay with consent for this? Okay. All right. And the other thing you're bringing back to us with changes, is that something we also have to approve?
you don't have to, I guess.
I
but
mean,
that
if we do, since we've already seen it once and the changes you're making are minor, could you just put it as an action item instead of because we can see the changes when we discuss it, if it needs to be
Okay,
approved.
Okay,
Did that make sense?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Public comments? Anybody have cards? Okay, thank you. City manager comments?
No additional comments.
Okay, thank you. Council comments? Anybody? I have one. I have a story. So a week ago, with Dunwoody resident Alyssa and my husband Barry, who drives me everywhere most of the time, we participated in DeKalb County's homeless count, along with Lieutenant Dove and his members of his night shift. And we did Dunwoody. The police had already gathered locations of where they saw we started. We got back to Dunwoody about 10:15 at night. We got back to our house at 3 in the morning. And I'm really doing this to commend Lieutenant Dove and his team because I about killed them. So at our second stop, which was the parking garage at Ashford Lane, the officers were following us, and Barry was we were the first car, and we got there, and I said, I'm gonna go check the parking garage, and I jumped out of the car, and I turned into the stairs, and as soon as I hit the first step, I thought, I probably should have waited for someone. So Barry said he's never seen people run that fast because they were jumping out of their cars because I was headed into the staircase by myself. And I was fairly confident there wasn't going to be anyone there. Sometimes I'm fearless and footloose and not always thinking things through. But we were under bridges and in the back of buildings, looking for people who didn't have shelter. And the officers were tremendous support. And there were more of them here. They left. But I wanted to thank you, Chief, and it's a little overdue because then I left town, but for their support. I certainly could not have done it without that. We could not have done it without them. And we continue to look for ways to help people in Dunwoody who are struggling with shelter. We actually didn't find very many people that night. We've, including the regulars that I see all the time or have seen. I haven't seen them since during the day. We couldn't find them at night. I will say that apparently MARTA has cleared out under their rail lines. I guess a few fires in a few places has made them nervous. So they've cleared out the camps that were underneath or where people were staying underneath those bridges. But again, Chief, I appreciate your team for their support. And I know that DeKalb County really appreciated us having a team and getting it done. So with that, are there any other comments? Seeing none, I need a motion to adjourn. So moved by Catherine.
Second.
Second by Rob. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.